Welcome back to Track Talk. Today we're going to be doing a game of 1870. I think this is the third game on the channel of this particular title. It's one that I've been enjoying recently, so figured we'd do another video. Prentice is leading us off in the auction, and he goes right on the Katie. Roger going for the Frisco, Jess, Gulf Shipping, and Ned. He is joining on Gulf Shipping. So one contested auction, and the last two players, Prentice and Roger, are incentivized to try and push things along here, but don't imagine we'll be seeing them get these for quite as low as they have right now. There's a chance that Roger does, but Prentice should not be given Katie for this cheap. So Prentice, he, as expected, is trying to incentivize an early pull here, but I think it'd be foolish on Roger's part to allow that. So he goes on Southern Cattle, and now the other two players are forced to price and force. Jess, Southern Cattle, and Ned, Mississippi Bridge. So interesting. This is going to work out for Prentice. He should end up with Katie here. I think that was a misplay from either Jess or Ned. They needed to go on his other private to prevent this. Instead, he passes. That's surprising. I think it's worth taking the $20 private to get a cheap Katie. And then well, I guess you only get one share of the Katie. So maybe he's worried that by going pulling here, he'll be losing the presidency of the Katie. But it's a good private. I think it's still worth pulling. Roger, is he going to be happy with the Frisco? He is. So I think that's pretty predictable on Prentice's part. Like, even if he doesn't take the cheap private, he's still probably going late enough in priority to lose out on the Katie presidency. Um, so I don't know that I agree with that. Regardless, we're on the Mississippi Bridge, and Prentice is on the most expensive private. Ned is between this and Gulf Shipping. So I think Ned is probably much more motivated to win this than Prentice is. That said, Prentice is probably safe to bid once just to bid up the price a little bit. He passes, and we're on to Southern Cattle. So pretty cheap private for Ned. And we'll see if he's able to get the Gulf Shipping as well. Southern Cattle is now up. This is kind of my least interesting private in my mind. I guess with the exception of the first one. We'll see if these players are willing to duke it out for this. Roger already has a private, but he's got the cheap one. So both players are pretty incentivized to win this. Frisco can make decent use of the shipping company as well. So decent synergy potential. Roger, he bids up. Jess, she's probably really wants to win at least one of these. They keep going, and Roger wins it. Interesting. So two players with no privates right now, although Prentice has one locked up, so well, really only one player. Jess really needs to win this one, I would think. And Jess wins it with only 95, reasonable. And then the last two privates are uncontested, so we'll see what the Frisco floats at. I imagine it's 100, and it does. So Jess has Gulf Shipping and enough cash to float. Ned has Mississippi Bridge and enough cash to float. And then Prentice should also be able to float with his Katie share if nobody takes it from him. That said, if I'm Ned, I might be looking at that Katie, take that company and just leave the bridge company to cut the map in half, limit other players' options. Jess, on the other hand, may be looking at the GMO just because it's so good with the Gulf Shipping. We'll see. She does. Min par. Ned, he takes Cotton. Okay. So Prentice is going to be allowed to get the Katie. Interesting. And Roger, with the Frisco, doesn't really need to buy any more shares. Probably does not want to. May just look to invest in paying shares here. GMO with the bridge, or sorry, with the shipping company, always reasonable to think about that. And Cotton, I don't know that I would be that excited about investing that, and the Katie's usually pretty safe too. So he may just put a share or two worth of investment in the GMO and the Katie. Passing for now. GMO continuing to float. Looks like everybody will just be floating their companies, and Roger is just sitting on cash. May see him do a little trashing in the next stock round as a result. He does not end up with priority deal. And that is because Prentice had that extra share lead with the Katie. So he was able to float one stock round earlier than Jess was. Works out pretty nice for Prentice so far, I have to say. Frisco has a decision here. Does he want to head north or south? Some expensive train down south, but potentially the option to piggyback off of Cotton's track lays, depending on how that works out. My preference would probably be to head up north and try and cooperate with Katie. We'll see what he decides. So heading west, going to be hitting a dit for his run, and unlikely to have two runs in the next operating round with this decision. Probably should just buy 1-2 train here. It's going to slow the game down. GMO is heading straight towards New Orleans, not setting up for a double run into the southeast. Oftentimes makes sense to double tap Mobile to take advantage of your shipping company. We're going to be seeing a little bit something different this game. If this bridge company doesn't open up, they could be in a dead end in New Orleans, but I think it's a safe assumption that the bridge will open up because we see Cotton starting with it. Buying 2 trains, so we'll be heading towards New Orleans, it looks like. And then Cotton uses the bridge, opens the map up, and should have 3 total track lays here. Gets over to Little Rock, and probably going to be making a beeline towards Fort Worth. I think we saw this in the second game we commented of 1870 a few weeks ago. And we'll see how the Frisco player is able to develop his track. Cotton is off to a little bit of a lead in terms of heading west here, just as a result of his extra track lay. It's also going to be a lot of dits for the Frisco. Yeah, I don't know about this start for Frisco. Cotton, he buys just a single 2 train. And last one up is Katie. Katie is actually heading south down to head down to the Frisco start. Oftentimes we'll see them lay Topeka. So potentially the Frisco player getting a little bit of a break here with an opportunity to token in Kansas City and also a better run than just hitting a dit. We'll see. Buys 2 trains, and we're into the stock round. Should be a pretty boring stock round. Roger's the only one really with money for anything interesting. So he's going to be depleting people's treasuries. Does cost him $4 for all these shares at this point. But they will be paying shares. This is going to leave Jess with priority into the next stock round. Ned anticipating the GMO having the highest revenue. 2 trains. Seems fairly confident in that, or fairly safe bet. And Roger, he is continuing to invest in the GMO. So GMO may be floating up, which will not change priority. So in terms of buying in their privates, a little bit of bad news for Jessica potentially. GMO's floating, and Roger, 1 more share for him if he wants it. He buys the Katie, so focusing on the high revenue shares, which seems like a good move. We're into the operating round. Frisco, he links up with Katie for a run, probably lays that dit. He does, and he's actually angling back towards Little Rock, but it's possible that Cotton can just bypass this and head on to Fort Worth earlier than really makes sense for Frisco to upgrade into Little Rock. Cotton, I will say, has used a token fairly early. This does secure his late game destination run, but there's no real reason to lay that token just yet. Frisco running for just 40, probably buys into the 3s. He does, and is able to buy in his private, but it's a pretty cheap one. So this opens up the 3s for everybody else who will be able to take advantage of green track as a result. Probably most important for GMO, actually, who can upgrade Mobile, and then, well, unfortunately, don't think they can run 2 trains if they upgrade Mobile, so that's a little bit unfortunate for them. Maybe should have prepared by laying track into the southeast in the last operating round. I think we had talked about that. Upgrades New Orleans, and it's going to be heading up north, maybe just hoping to bypass some of the expensive terrain, take advantage of track laid by Cotton down the road, but very unlikely they end up with a token in Little Rock, so it needs to be a little bit careful they don't get tokened out. Regardless, running 2 trains, and actually tokens in New Orleans. Okay. Are they going to put their bridge down, or their shipping company? Looks like it. So we'll have a revenue of 100. So he's nice, buys a 3 so it doesn't fall back, and may see this company being sold down a fair amount as a result of its depleted treasury. I have to imagine it's going to be withholding a little bit. And in terms of operating, Jess has priority. Could even dump this on the Frisco player. Roger left himself open to that. Probably not the end of the world, especially now that it's thrown its token away in New Orleans. Going to be hard for it to have really good long-term routes. Not made any progress really down to St. Louis or up to St. Louis. So may see a dump here. Does have a 3 train, so not the end of the world if it's dumped, but still not ideal. Cotton, he is making a beeline west, runs just 2 train for 40, pays it out, should be buying a 3 here. Buys 2 3s, so we'll be running pretty well in green. And looks like he did not buy in any privates. Did he have privates to buy in? He had already used his bridge company, I see. Katie lays Topeka and is heading west still. So the Santa Fe is probably going to be on the short list of companies to float with these private buy-ins. May see Jess do that now that she sold out, if she sells out of the GMO. Running for 80, pays it out, buying the 3, and the 4s will be coming out very early, potentially before anybody operates in the next operating round if the Frisco gets sold down, which I would like to see somebody do. Jess is up. She dumping the GMO. She is holding on to it for now, so being a little bit passive in this game. At this point, the company is really a liability. You're going to have to do heavy withholding to afford better trains. Doesn't have great track or long-term potential based on the way the early track lays have gone. So probably would have been the right move to dump it here. I imagine we'll see Roger sell out and then potentially float another company. Ned, not a lot of cash. He buys the Katy, Prentice, ton of cash, and he is buying paying shares for now. But I do think we will see him float a company. I think he's just depleting the treasuries of these companies. Roger, he sells out of the GMO, just missed our opportunity, and what is he going to be floating now? He buys his own Frisco. Interesting. Would have expected him to either trash other people's companies and then float, or just straight up float. So buying your own treasury share, especially in a company that just has a single 3 train momentarily, is an interesting decision. Jess? She has her company redeem a share. Okay, so one less withhold potentially. Long term, Ned, he is also having his company redeem a share that's been sold. Prentice, he's going to continue to work on trashing the cotton and may just go around and trash everyone further. I don't think he's going to be holding on to these cotton shares. Roger, he's leaping on the cotton bandwagon. And Jess, buying the Katy. I don't think she's in a position to sell these shares. I think she needs to find paying shares, which is going to protect the Katy a little bit from being trashed, but it already has lost its treasury, so still not great news for it. Ned, he buys the Southwest, so I think he redeemed a share for himself and then used that money to buy yet another share of the Southwest, the cotton. I called it the Southwest. That's my mistake. Yeah, so his company redeemed a share from his presidency, which allowed him to buy another share. So his company's floating right now, but we may see these shares trashed. Prentice, buying the GMO. Roger, Frisco. So he is working on buying these very expensive shares that are going to have kind of underwhelming revenue. Now, that said, I've been kind of analyzing this under the assumption that someone was going to be floating a company, but if nobody floats, then these 2 trains are not going to rust, and then the Frisco is looking like a better investment than would otherwise be the case. Yeah, I'm surprised that we haven't seen another company float here. Jess, also buying the Frisco. Ned, out of cash. Prentice, buying the GMO, now floating. Roger, Frisco. Everybody's out of cash except for Prentice, which may end up with Roger and with priority, which would be pretty good for him. Okay, so another Frisco share goes, and there's no shares available anymore. But we've seen everybody wait so long, I imagine we're just going to see it pass into the operating round, which we do. Okay. Well, I don't know. That's not the way I would have played it. I'm surprised to see nobody pushing trains here. We do have green, so I may see Frisco upgrade Kansas City to run his three trains. This is a gift to him. I don't think he really should have been given this opportunity by the other players. Does he drop a token there? He does, and he even gets cattle down. Um, so this is working out great for him. He's got the majority investment, still has 3 shares in the treasury. Yeah, this is a really nice start for him. Running for 160, pays it out. Cotton heading down towards Fort Worth still. It's going to have an early destination in the next operating round, it looks like. Doesn't have the ability to run more than one train, though, so that's really underwhelming. Bad news for Ned. I don't believe he was one of the players that was in a position to float a new company. Um, so can't fault him necessarily, but I don't know about these other players that bought in their privates and did nothing really with the money. Katie also in a position to run 3 trains. Actually, we'll need to drop a token to do that. Or it could lay track to the east of Kansas City, but that would just be a dit. Maybe not worthwhile. Upgrades to Pika. And not going to be tokening for now, so just running 2 trains for 120, holding onto his token. GMO, curious to see where this company goes. The start has been a little bit atypical. So linking up with the IC, kind of back on track in terms of typical track at this point. Can run all 3 trains, but still not able to take full advantage of Mobile. With 3 trains, you kind of want to triple tap that, and only double tapping it for now. So, and they closed the port? What am I missing here? This may be a newer player. They're the only player running into the port, and they just closed it, so they're reducing their revenue. Either a misclick or kind of a misunderstanding. Running for 160, pays out, and we're back into the next set of this operating round, operating in 3.2. Frisco probably going to be heading down south towards the track laid by Cotton at this point. Instead, laying a loop into Topeka to double tap Kansas City and Topeka with the cattle. Running as many trains out of Kansas City as possible is very reasonable. So it looks like that we'll be seeing, and is actually able to do both. So detouring up north, but then gradually heading over towards the Cotton track. Still has a token, and Katie has not yet upgraded Springfield, so doesn't have any concern about losing out on tokens in Little Rock just yet. Running for 210, pretty monstrous revenue for this early in the game, and really something that I think the other players had to prevent. I'm surprised that he's running these 2 trains still. I keep calling it Southwest. Cotton heading into Fort Worth does get an early destination and should have another run for himself now. So that's going to increase his revenue. Good news for Ned. Running for 80, and then do we see the destination run? Yes. He takes the map token and is going to be doubling Fort Worth for the rest of the game. Only 40 right now, but it's going to get better later. So gets a extra run on the other players. We'll have some extra cash into the stock round. Katie, he is heading down south, and he also can run 3 trains out of Kansas City. So running for 180 and pays it out. GMO, upgrading Mobile, but unfortunately only has 2 runs out of it because has been a little bit of a dilly-dally or delay in terms of developing this track. This really hurts when you have the private that is so well suited to this opening and you throw it away. Running for 180, paying it out, and we're into the next stock round. So Prentice is cash leader and also a fair bit ahead in terms of net worth, but going last in priority. So may see that net worth kind of cut down to size if other players sell shares before he's able to exit his positions. Roger, meanwhile, leading us in priority, has a good amount of cash, third most. Jess has a fair amount of cash as well. Ned trailing in net worth and in cash, and really needed that destination run to keep himself in the stock round, or else he would really not have had enough cash to do anything useful. So at least he's got a little bit of an opening there. There's no shares other than the Frisco shares. that are available. So have to imagine we're going to be seeing a new company float here. And Roger was given priority, so he's getting a gift of his choice of company. If we look at the map, which companies do you want? Fort Worth has all of its track laid for it, so reasonable. IC, I would probably prefer the IC over the Fort Worth. Um, and then the Santa Fe, one of those three companies look good to me. I have a a special place for the Mopac, but I don't know if it's worth starting that company in this situation when you have better options. So I imagine we'll see a Santa Fe, but let's see. Instead, buying his own shares. I've really not been doing a good job of predicting what players' actions are going to be in this game. This is surprising to me because you have to assume that someone else is going to be selling the Santa Fe. So if you really want that share, you could buy it off the market for cheaper and leave your treasury intact. Plus, you're depleting your cash to price protect. Hmm. So well, I guess from that perspective, maybe that's why we don't see him float, because he wants to have the cash to price protect. But yeah, I don't see it. Jess, she is buying a Frisco share as well. Okay. Does she immediately sell both shares? Just want the $20 of arbitrage? Nope, passing for now. Ned. So everybody is just buying shares. I am very surprised to see this. I have to imagine that someone's going to be floating a company here and someone's going to be selling. And I think that the other players should be assuming that too. So if you have that assumption, why would you be buying shares that are about to be sold down? Prentice, he sells the GMO first, and that is Jess's company. So he may be trying to sell things in certain order to end up with, the double stock buy. For instance, if he sells the cotton last and forces Ned to price protect. So he takes the Santa Fe. This is probably something that should not have been possible. The other players should have taken this par, but it doesn't look like he's selling the cotton, so at least he's not going to be getting the double action. Jess does price protect, and actions back to Ned, who is passing with cash. Prentice buying his Santa Fe. Roger buying the Santa Fe and helping it to float. That's interesting. He doesn't have other options to invest his cash. I struggle to explain these actions. This may just be a very passive group of players. They aren't really attacking each other's share value. They aren't pushing trains. They're just kind of letting the status quo, everybody just kind of float through the game. Jess, she buys the Santa Fe as well. So I don't know if these players are going to be trashing this company or if they just are looking for places to put away their money. Ned, he is passing, which makes me think that he's going to get up to some shenanigans at least. Maybe buy and sell a Santa Fe share real quick at the end of the stock round. Roger, he's passing. Jess, buying a second share of the Santa Fe. Okay. Ned, and then Prentice, he's got up to 5 shares. Secure presidency, doesn't have to buy anymore. May want to just pass and sit on cash. He is share leader by a good margin, net worth leader. If the other players are just going to let him walk away with the game, I don't see why he would try and upset that status quo. Rogers passing with a bunch of cash. Jess also passing. Ned passing, and Prentice, he's buying a Pang share in the Santa Fe. This will leave Roger with priority, and we're into operating round 4. 2 trains are still alive. This is not an excusable game state. I don't think this is a problem. Somebody who is probably not named Prentice needs to change this up. Although I guess Prentice with the newly floated company is the most likely player to change it up. If we just look at the spreadsheet for a moment, last operating round, Prentice was running for the most. So yeah, and he was able to parlay that into a second company. We'll see if anybody's motivated here to buy into the 4s. Upgrading Springfield, opening a token up for Katie, I guess. I think probably Katie wants that. Doesn't have the cash for it though. Cotton fortunately doesn't have any tokens left, so there's no competition. I guess it's safe for Katie to just leave it open for now, but I think we'll eventually see that locked down so that people can't run into Kansas City as easily. running for 220. Very nice revenue, but there's nothing left in the treasury, so he's splitting 60-40 with his treasury versus his opponents. Makes it less lucrative than his runs last operating round when we consider the net. Cotton needs to get a third run for himself. Could get that running down into Jackson. He may be tempted to upgrade Fort Worth, but it's probably more cash to get the ability to run his third train. Looks like he sees that and is going to have a 3-run, actually not just down into Jackson, but actually into New Orleans, which is pretty darn good. So he'll have a big increase in his net worth, or not net worth, but revenue. Doubled it. Katy, still 3 trains. Imagine we'll start seeing him head southwest. Has all of his route that he really needs at this point. I guess could upgrade into Little Rock on H11. No real urgency for that. So just heading southwest, running his 3 trains for 190, and he pays that out. He's also in a situation where he's going to have to withhold or start a second company. Sorry, he's already started a second company. He's going to need some cash somehow for a permanent train in this company. We'll see how he goes about that. GMO upgrades New Orleans, 20 extra bucks, and is paying for 220. First operation of the Santa Fe. Do expect we'll see the 2 trains finally rusting here, but boy, it's been a long time. Heading south, Santa Fe and Kansas City have great synergy in terms of destinations, so if you're able to run those in a single presidency, you're off to the races. Really good start. Prentice doesn't look like he's leaving a token anywhere and should be buying the 3 and the 4. He does. Well, he shuffles cash into the Katy, actually, so he's going to let the 2 survive yet another operating round. And this is interesting, right? Because you're giving the Frisco the ability to run his 2 trains, but you've bought one of your 2 trains out of the Katy, so it's not going to run in operating 4.2. Yeah, interesting. Surprised we didn't see the 4 train come out here. Frisco does have cash for the 4, so could even just see him buy the 4 before the Cotton even runs his 2, which is really bad. Now the Prentice player has lost the run on all of their 2s relative to Roger by not buying that 4. So Frisco gets the run into Little Rock. Not able to token there just yet, but I believe we'll still have the jump on that token compared to the Katy. No, Katy now has token money. So in fact, this upgrade here may give that token away if he's not careful. I don't know that Katy necessarily really values that token. May hold on to his token and not token in Little Rock regardless. Just because Katy's interest is more headed west. But it would hurt the Frisco player to token there, so maybe it's worthwhile for that reason. Running for 220 again, pays it out, and does buy the 4. So yeah, I think that's a misplay from Prentice. He gives the 2 trains a run to Roger by buying the 3, but not the 4. Cotton still has 2 3 trains, so it's not going to be missing the 2 train that much. And he upgrades Fort Worth, going to be doubling that revenue, of course, and running for 170, which he pays. Katy, he is upgrading Oklahoma City. Surprised that we didn't see that token in Little Rock, to be honest. Running a single 3 train for just 90 and pays it out. He buys a 4 now. Could have done that last operating round and then bought it across. So going to end up with a 4 in the Katy either way, but you would deny Roger the run of the 2s. A little inefficient there. GMO running his 3 train, and he's upgrading Jackson. I should say she's upgrading Jackson. Running for 110 and pays it out. How much money has this player lost at this point as a result of this closed port? It's got to be like $30, $40 of revenue at least. And when I say that, I don't mean that to be, insignificant amount. If that gets you a token or if it's one withhold later in the game for a permanent train, that can be a really big deal. Or it's the difference between a share in the stock round and not having a share, for instance. These little amounts make big differences. Santa Fe, he's going to be looking to link up with the track laid by Cotton and get into Fort Worth that way. running his 3, and he's withholding, so going to be a yellow strategy from Prentice, which we see a lot in 70. Like we said, he's going to need 2 permanent trains for both of his companies and has very little company cash, so can get share density by running in yellow and then also hope to afford his trains a little bit easier. We're into the next stock round. Roger leads us off, and he is in second place in terms of net worth. Most cash into the stock round, was given a little bit of a gift by Prentice with these 2 trains, and is in a pretty healthy position as a result. The Frisco has a 4 train, going to be lasting a while. Even though 3 trains going to be lasting a while, so his revenue is going to be okay, especially with that token in Kansas City he was able to snag. Um, and he's got cash to float now. So are we going to finally see players starting to float companies and push trains? It's been a very slow game to date. If he does float a company, could be looking at the Fort Worth or the IC. I think I still would favor the IC over the Fort Worth. We'll see. So he pars the IC for max. He's going to have to sell shares eventually to do it. May want to do that up front before he loses the share value. But he's going to pass, so a little bit inefficient. If other people sell shares and trash their value before he's able to sell, he may be regretting things. I suppose he could be just reserving this presidency, but I don't imagine that's the case. Jess probably also needs to float a company here. It's really been slow playing it this entire game so far. So instead, going to be buying a share in Rogers' company. That's interesting. Ned, he is selling, maybe seeing him float, and he sells the GMO, so maybe hoping to get the double action if Jess price protects. He's taken the Fort Worth, so the 2 companies we kind of identified as being the most exciting are now floated, or I should say par. Jess does price protect, so up to 80% of the GMO, but this is not going to be a very healthy company, and this gives Ned another crack at the Fort Worth. On Apprentice, he also sells a GMO, so Jess is going to end up with 90% of this company and 1 share in the treasury, it looks like. And he takes the Texas Pacific. Jess is probably price protecting, does. And this gives Ned a 4th action, so this can be a very fast float of the Fort Worth. Prentice buying his Texas Pacific. Roger, been a while since he's got an action in the stock round as a result of these price protections, and is he gonna head back towards the IC? He is. And does it get any more help from Jess in terms of floating this company? Not yet. So Jess is selling 2 shares of the Katie. Prentice can technically price protect here if he wants. And just looking at the market, may make sense to price protect because if he price protects twice and then sells these shares individually, he'll hit the ledge and save his stock value a little bit. So although he's floating a company, may make sense to take a detour and price protect here and then sell these shares individually. She's parring the SOPAC. Could have done this much earlier, but it was a little bit lackadaisical, and now it's going to lack capital to par without selling shares as a result of price protecting the GMO so heavily. We'll see if Prentice price protects here or not. He does. I imagine we'll see him sell those shares one at a time, but no guarantees in this game. Roger back up. He is redeeming a share. Pretty expensive share. He does redeem it from his presidency, so he's going to have a little more cash for shares in this stock round. Jess is selling the share that Roger was floating. This is going to give him the opportunity to price protect and then also allow her to work on floating her SOPAC. Imagine we'll see this price protected. He does, and Jess is going to be working on the SOPAC still. Only at 40%. We'll see what else she wants to sell. Maybe should have waited to sell the IC since she knows she's going to have to sell multiple shares and sold that one later in the stock round so she could have a higher chance of ending up with priority. Ned buying his Fort Worth. Prentice probably selling a Katie here. Instead selling the cotton. So I guess it's true that he doesn't necessarily have to sell the Katie. Um, okay. I was expecting him to sell them down one at a time, but since the cotton is so expensive and it just has three trains, maybe it makes more sense to sell that company. Fair enough. He also sells a company that can't be price protected, so it's going to hurt his opponents a little bit. Actually drops it below the ledge too. Roger buying his IC. Jess needs to sell shares here. And selling the Frisco. So I think I didn't recognize that she had more than one share of the Frisco to sell, because I think she did that earlier too. Roger can't price protect, so she's just gonna exchange shares for the Frisco for the IC, it looks like. Or not the IC, the SOPAC. Ned almost out of cash. And he's got one more share to buy. He does have exactly enough cash for it, so he just does that. May see that share sold, and then a paying share bought before the stock round ends, which is exactly what happens. And Prentice still working on floating his company. Back to Roger, who has floated the IC now. Could see him do the same thing that Ned just did and sell one share of his company, which he does. Do need to look at operating order a little bit here. We have three, 4 trains left before the 5 trains come out. 5 trains, of course, not technically permanent, but could it be permanent depending on if we make it to the 12s or not. Have seen some higher pars, and also at least one company is already withholding. So it's hard to predict this early in the game whether or not the 12s are going to come out or not, but not unreasonable to expect them. And I just bring that up to say that, the IC versus the SOPAC operating first, you have a higher chance of ending up with a 5 train if you operate a little bit later. So may see some jockeying between Jess and Roger in terms of operating order here. He's also selling a Katie. Prentice has exhausted his treasury, or his liquidity, so he's not going to be able to price protect here. Maybe that's why Roger was waiting to sell. Jess floats her SOPAC and does not sell it down, so looks like Roger's been successful in manipulating operating order, at least for now. Ned, he goes back for the Santa Fe, going to be floating that up a little bit. Prentice, he is now floated on the Texas Pacific and not selling down just yet. Roger, he buys the Frisco and he bought it off the market, so it looks like he'll be floating. He's almost out of cash. Could buy a cheaper share, but I don't know that he necessarily wants to buy one of these newly floated companies. They just want to sit on cash. Jess passing, Ned. Looks like everybody's passing except for potentially Roger. Actually, Prentice does still have some tricks up his sleeve, and his Katie redeems a share. So he and Jess both have companies where they are massive owners. Katie does have one other investor right now, but pretty close to being sole president for Prentice. Roger, he buys the Fort Worth, and maybe he's just trashing the other players' shares that they sold down. Nope. So he's going to pass into the stock round. This leaves Jess with priority, and we're into operating round 5. Frisco is up and has some life on both of his trains yet. We'll see where he's looking to head in terms of track. May need to secure that token in Little Rock. There was no guarantee that he was going to get that. I thought that Katie might, but looks like he's going to end up with it after all. Actually not. He's going to bypass Little Rock. I guess the token in Memphis is more valuable, especially if you can bypass Little Rock. It did cost him some terrain costs to do that, so he's technically not going to have token money, but with a payout here, I think he'll end up with enough. So may see that. GMO, I think the GMO still has a token as well. Actually, it does not. So the token in Memphis should be pretty much guaranteed for Frisco if he wants it. That's bad news for the IC. And actually, I guess the IC could steal it from him. That's his other company, though. Would we see him get all the way down into Jackson and token there? That would be interesting. That'd be really bad for the GMO. Runs for 190, pays it out. Katie's up. Does get the upgrade that they were looking for into Fort Worth. Going to take a little bit more time for him to get down to the southwest, but it's only a matter of time at this point. And there's really nobody in a position to token him out at Fort Worth since he has the Santa Fe and the Katy. The only person that would be doing it would be the Frisco, and Frisco has designs elsewhere. So should feel pretty safe with his tokens. I suppose the Texas Pacific could eventually do it, but may want to save his tokens for other locations. Fort Worth is not going to get him anywhere exciting. Runs for 190, pays it. Cotton. He is upgrading through Oklahoma City and hoping to, I guess, head to Denver for his other company, their destination run. So he's hoping that Oklahoma City goes untokened, which is probably a safe bet. Runs for 200 and pays it. GMO, just a single 3-train. This company has really not been impressing. She does own 90% of it, so the revenue is higher than it looks, but boy, it's not been fun to watch this company this game at least. Running his 3-train for 110, pays it out. New company now, the SOPAC, just a second company. Hopefully gets to a better start than the GMO did. Heading up north towards Fort Worth. Token there could be painful for Prentice in the Santa Fe and the Katy, and that may end up happening. Running for, actually not running just yet, but buying a 3-train. We'll see if they really want to push to the 5s. Going to hold at a single 4 for right now. IC is up and working along the east side of the board. Looks like they're maybe expecting a token in Memphis, but could also just upgrade I-18 to bypass Memphis and still get to its destination. So a little bit surprised we're seeing it head out from Mobile. This is Roger, who is also running the Frisco. So I suppose he's just looking to lay track for the Frisco to reach its destination. Looks like Frisco is going to run into Memphis and then try and upgrade here to get a quick run down into Mobile and then the southeast. So that makes sense. He's prioritizing the Frisco over the IC for now. We'll eventually build track for the IC, I'm sure. Buys the second to last 4, and we're on to the Texas Pacific. He links up with Fort Worth, and does he token there immediately? He does, so bad news for SOPAC. And also bad news for Prentice on the Katy and Santa Fe. This is his own company, so I assume that he saw that he was going to be losing out on this token one way or the other and just wanted to secure it for himself. Buys the last 4 and then a train out of the Katy. So Katy looks like it has 5-train money now. And unfortunately, he has 3 companies and will not have any permanent trains. So we'll see. He's going to have to do some heavy withholding. Probably on that Santa Fe still. That's only out of the yellow because it was floated up by the other players. Fort Worth. Fort Worth is now totally tokened out. Does have a good amount of cash. Could see him buy a 4 and a 5 here. Heading up towards Denver, his destination. He may need to drop a token here to ensure his runs. He does. It's always painful to token Oklahoma City, but if you get tokened out there as the Fort Worth, you're going to be pretty miserable. So it's kind of not a decision you want to make, but a decision you sometimes have to make. He buys the 5, and we are on to the Santa Fe. Santa Fe needs to start working around Fort Worth, I think, for his destination runs on both of his companies. Instead, going to be taking advantage of Brown Track, running just a single train. I don't know if it's worth the $10 increase in your revenue to delay your destination run. Regardless, he runs for 100, and does he withhold again? He does. Back into yellow and inching his way towards permanent trains. Onto the next operating round in the set. Frisco's up. Imagine we'll be seeing him head towards Memphis and hoping to eventually upgrade into that southeast destination run. So far, only one company has run their destination run, Cotton. So he's also backtracking and getting a brown tile down instead of advancing his track. He does have 2 trains running out of that, so at least it's a little more revenue than it was for the Santa Fe, but still, I was anticipating him heading down towards Memphis. Running for 250, which he pays. Katy, just a single train now. Looking to potentially bypass Oklahoma City, maybe worried about one of these Texas companies or Southern companies tokening him out there, just preparing for the late game. But again, neither of his companies have made any progress towards the Southwest in this set. Running his 4 train for 150, pays it out. Cotton's up, and he upgrades Memphis actually, so that's helpful for Roger. And he is running for 220. Of all the places to upgrade, I'm surprised that we see Memphis. Why not upgrade Fort Worth if you're going to be doubling that revenue? Yeah, not sure about that. GMO trainless. How did that happen? I must have missed that she bought a train across. And upgrading New Orleans. Buys a 5, but doesn't have the cash to buy a second train. A little bit inefficient. Has to fall back on her GMO, which she knows owns 90% of it, and isn't able to afford, even 2 trains to shuffle around. If you own 90% of a company, you really got to make sure you're paying out. SP running a 4 train, but it's tokened out at Fort Worth, so only has a 3 run available. And looks like they're going to be eventually heading over to New Orleans, but it's going to take a long time to get there. Running for 90, pays it out. The Ick, he links up with the Frisco. And Frisco, does it have a long enough train to destinate now? We'll need a 5 train. I don't think it does. Nope. So Frisco's going to have to bypass the city or get a longer train before it can take advantage of this track, but does now technically have the run it needs. Imagine we'll see the Ick now starting to head north towards Chicago. And he tokens in Springfield, so his 2 companies have cut the map in half, basically, both east-west and north-south, with a token in Springfield. That's interesting. Probably not ideal for the other players. This is a lot of map control for Roger. Running for 140. Texas Pacific does have 2 trains, doesn't really have the track to take full advantage of them just yet, but with some clever upgrades on I-6, may be able to improve his runs a little bit. Which is what happens, running for 200. Pretty good revenue, especially for someone that is a sole investor in the company. And he pays that out. Fort Worth now does have a 5 train, but underwhelming runs. Could link up with Denver here and at least destinate for a little extra revenue into the next stock round. Instead, upgrading Little Rock. This is interesting. Not sure where he's headed with this. Doesn't really help the Cotton very much, and he's foregoing a destination run. Running for 170. Half pays, and that will give him cash for a 5, so he'll have 2 5 trains. But he's actually not going to buy the 5 train. He's buying a train out of the Cotton. Cotton should have a bunch of money now. And I guess he's angling for a 6 in the Cotton. Going to run a 5 and a 6 and hope the 12s don't come out. Santa Fe. He is still working on potentially bypassing Oklahoma City. Doesn't want to pay the train costs to run into the Southwest through Oklahoma City, but he's really getting delayed here. Probably another withhold from him. Running for 120 and actually half pays. So not enough to leave yellow, but at least he gets a little more cash into the next stock round. We're into stock round 6, and just looking at the game state, Prentice is ahead, probably just virtue of shares at this point. His company's runs have not been incredible, but he has more shares than everybody else and has for a couple of operating sets now. So I think that's why he's pulling ahead. Roger, interesting position with the Frisco and the Ick. Has good map control and will end up with probably a 5 or 6 in the short order, so may have one of his trains covered. And he's in a pretty close second place. Good map control for him. Ned on the Fort Worth and Cotton is in third place, and actually fourth place, and probably deservedly so with these two companies. Pretty bad map control and no permanent trains. I don't like his odds in this game. Jess with the GMO in the Southern Pacific also has been kind of fumbling at certain points in the game, so third place, not surprising. Does have a lot of shares, second most shares, so is staying in the game somewhat, but I expect we'll see this game coming down to Prentice and Roger. Jess first action here, and we'll be buying the Fort Worth. Does have 2 trains, decent runs. Ned buying the Frisco. Actually, selling the Frisco, sorry. Does that mean that he'll be floating the Mopac? And does. Okay. A very low par of the Mopac. I think that's an error. He had plenty of cash to par that high. Um, this is not going to help him afford permanent trains, and the Mopac at this late stage has lost out on a lot of tokens, a lot of track development. So if you're going to par a company, you need to do something with that. And parring it so low, it's going to really make it hard to push trains or afford a permanent train for one of your other companies. That seems like an error. He has sold Roger's company, so we'll see if Roger wants to price protect, and he may very well. The Frisco is going to end up with a pretty good train, and we'll have good routes about to destinate, so may make sense to price protect here. He does. This gives us back to Jess, and Jess is buying another Fort Worth. I believe she bought that last time too. And now is selling the Santa Fe. Santa Fe has been withholding, but Prentice may be happy to pick that up. These are all yellow shares, and the Santa Fe is decently positioned for the late game. We do see a price protection there. Roger, he is buying the Texas Pacific, 2 trains, and depleting his opponent's treasury. Reasonable. Jess, passing. Okay. It's always, I guess it's a little counterintuitive as someone coming from an 1830 background, see the players passing with this much cash early in the stock rounds, but there are a lot of mechanisms for shenanigans in 1870 that you have to be aware of in terms of, trashing shares when players can't price protect and just holding cash so you can price protect. So I may be a little bit harsh on players for passing with cash, that kind of thing, but that's not necessarily always a valid criticism in a game like 1870. Ned, he's he's floating the MP. Probably will see him continue to do that unless he wants to go around trashing. So he is buying an Ick. May see him just deplete people's treasuries. I suppose that he could just sit on this MP treasury and reserve it for later. But boy, I would have liked to have seen him par that higher if that was his goal. Prentice buying the Cotton. Roger buying Ick. He's now to cash. Jess sells a Sopac, her own company, and with that money, she bought another Fort Worth. I think she's bought 4 or 3 shares of the Fort Worth. This stock round really is a fixation for that company. He's also share locked, first player to meet their share limit as a result of really not owning any yellow shares. Ned, he is buying the Fort Worth as well. Prentice buying Cotton. Cotton's pretty expensive. Does have decent map position. Well, it's kind of maxed out on its map position already, actually. Not the most important share, but will potentially end up with a 6 train, so reasonable from that perspective. It is a little bit dangerous move in terms of buying Ned shares, right? He operates right ahead of you, so very easy for him to dump this company trainless. And then he also has the option to open up with the MP. So if he were to dump the cotton, he could then put all of his resources into the Mopac. Roger passing Jess, also passing Ned. Looks like he is going back for the Mopac, so we'll be seeing this company float. Prentice, he's going back for paying shares in the SOPAC, buying the share that was sold by Jess for a little cheaper. Jess passing, Ned working on that float still. Prentice is passing, so everybody's passing. Prentice is unwilling to buy a share, I guess, just in case somebody trashes one of his companies, wants to have the cash available to price protect. Wouldn't be enough for the Katy, would be enough for the Santa Fe easily. And then he's also going to be leaving with priority here. So I guess he feels safe buying Ned's companies because he's pretty certain that Ned is going to give him priority. Ned is selling an IC, maybe hoping to incentivize someone else to take some actions. But Roger doesn't have enough money to price protect that anyways, so that's interesting. Prentice is also spurred to action now, and he's selling an SP. So just wanting to maintain priority or maintain operating order there. I'm not entirely sure what just happened there. Ned now has floated, and he immediately sells a Mopac. Gets a little closer to yellow potentially. Also has money for paying shares. I think Prentice and the rest of the players are probably still passing here. And Ned buying the Texas Pacific, and I think that'll probably be basically it for the stock round. Yep. So Roger's up on the Frisco, and we should be seeing the 6 train come out here pretty early. There's a 5 train in advance. So the Mopac has the cash for it, and I imagine we'll see the Frisco probably will buy a 5 here. I think these players are all kind of assuming that the 12s are going to be permanent, or the 5s are going to be permanents. Not an unreasonable assumption. This was a very low par on the Mopac, and nobody has that much cash other than the cotton. So reasonable to assume that your 5s are going to be a good investment in this game. Frisco, and upgrading Memphis, and tokens in Mobile. That's interesting. Okay. It kind of hurts his ick a little bit. Southeast is a decent revenue location. Runs for 170, pays it out, and does he buy the 5? He does not. So gonna force the Mopac to buy that 5 probably. Katy, he is slowly working on bypassing Fort Worth, taking him a very long time to get down there. Running for 290, so decent, pretty good revenue, I should say, especially for an 80% presidency. Cotton, 603, upgrades Little Rock, a little bit of extra money for him. Running for 140, and I suppose he could buy the 5, which he does not. GMO, 2 trains, 90% presidency, so should have some decent revenue for Jess, even without a destination, but really expect them to be heading up north. Instead, upgrading Jackson. I don't think these tiny little upgrades here and there are worth delaying your destination run, but it seems like all these players are making the same decision. So running for 360, really good revenue. IC, upgrading Springfield, running for 300, high revenue. May see a little bit of a pause or a stall in the game as players just kind of gird themselves for the onset of the permanent trains. Seems like they're all content to just have good runs. Southern Pacific, going to be heading over towards New Orleans eventually, I assume. Running for just 90. Texas Pacific, still not getting into Denver. I guess it's Fort Worth, actually, that I should be expecting to lay that track. Texas Pacific is heading over towards New Orleans eventually. So running for 280. All the players have pretty good revenue here. And then does Fort Worth get into Denver? I think you have to. What else are you going to be laying? this is unusual. Um, so laying track through Memphis, I guess this helps his Mopac eventually, but yeah, I don't know. You're going to be doubling Denver if you just lay that single track. Seems worthwhile. Running for 330, Mopac. He's heading south, so probably hoping to snag a token in Memphis, which would be bad news for the Frisco player. But this should be avoidable. Actually, Frisco threw away its token in Mobile, so it's not. That may be a mistake. Buys the last 5. Actually, does not buy the last 5. He's shuffling a train. And is this the same mistake that Prentice made before, where they shuffle the train instead of buying the permanent and rusting other people's trains? No, because the 5 train wouldn't be rusting anything, so never mind. Santa Fe, upgrading in Dallas. So it's interesting that the Katy and the Santa Fe are really not working in concert with one another. Um, Katy was upgrading over here, and Santa Fe is upgrading over here. If they had worked together, he would have had a run into the Southwest. So if Katy upgrades Dallas and then Santa Fe lays this track, they get their destination. A little bit confused to see the president kind of haphazardly approaching this track lay. He tokens in Dallas, so has secured a late game run for one of his companies basically into the Southwest. And maybe that's why he's splitting his attention, because he realizes only one of his companies is going to secure that token. But doesn't seem, I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't seem worthwhile. Running for 120 and half paying still. So he's just going to be hovering right at the precipice of this yellow zone. I like seeing this play. It's clever. He's not hurting his net worth as much as he would by full withholding and falling back deeper and deeper into yellow. He's able to just hover there and maintain his share density, but still get some president cash. It's nice. Frisco's up, second round in this set. And looks like they are working on bypassing Jackson and still doesn't have a 5 train, so not going to be running his destination route just yet. Runs for 180, which he pays. Katy is still working on the bypass of Dallas. We'll be able to get there in the next operating round, it looks like. So actually, with the help of the Santa Fe, may see both of his companies destinate here, which will be a nice influx of cash. He's running for 320 still and pays it. Cotton, maybe we'll see the 6 train come out here, which will shake things up a little bit. He instead is linking up with Mopac, and that terrain cost is going to keep him off of the 6 train without a withhold. The Mopac, I think, could have laid that track themselves. I guess he didn't have enough money for the track and the token, so he's going to be a little bit inefficient. He will have to withhold if he wants the 6 train, which I think he wants to bring out. Just looking at his companies here, he could potentially secure 2 6 trains between the Cotton and the Fort Worth, which would be pretty strong. But I understand he wants to protect the Mopac. So instead of withholding for this, oh, actually there's a 5 train still available. Okay, so we are seeing a little bit of a stall. Looks like the GMO and the Mopac have connected their destinations, so a little bit of extra cash. And we're on to, it looks like they were still doing destination runs, so Mopac is taking the bonus, and the GMO previously had taken the bonus as well. So destination runs are over, and we're on to the actual operation of the GMO. GMO, are they going to look to hurt the IC and lay some tragic track up north? Or do they just upgrade Mobile? They want to just upgrade Mobile. Instead, laying east or west of Little Rock and opening up a run into Denver, which doesn't seem very impactful. Runs for 380, nice revenue. IC is up, and imagine we'll be seeing them head over to Chicago. So they're going to be bypassing St. Louis and eventually in the next operating round hitting their destination. running for 300, which he pays. Southern Pacific is able to take advantage of the same bypass that the Katy is going to be taking advantage of, but doesn't have a long enough train to hit New Orleans. And actually, this upgrade here is going to block them from getting into New Orleans via this northern route. So they're going to have to recalculate here and head down south, which is going to be very slow for them. So going to be connecting the Katy into its destination, but as mentioned, unable to hit his own destination as of yet. Running a 4 train now for 110, still pretty poor revenue, half paying, and both Katy and Santa Fe have now destinated. This was going to happen regardless of the SOPAC's actions, but really kind of unfortunate that they lost out on this track here. So the GMO's action was more significant than I had expected. And actually, the GMO is the president of the Southern Pacific, so kind of screwed themselves with this track lay, I would say. Destination run for the Katy is 330, pays it out, and then Santa Fe destination run is just 120. Pretty impressive that it can run from Topeka down into the southwest with just a 3 train. Looks like they both elected to take the map tokens, so we'll be doubling the southwest for the rest of the game. On to the Texas Pacific. He is continuing to lay some bypasses. This potentially allows them to bypass a token in Memphis or Little Rock down the road, but I'm not sure that that's going to come to play. Running for 280 and pays it out. Fort Worth. Are we going to finally see a 6 train come out? This could be the final run of the 3s. I was expecting this much earlier. I think I kept forgetting that there was a 5 train. Runs for 110, 140, pays it out, and we do see a 6 train come out. So that will remove cattle and the shipping and then rust a bunch of 3s. Does this leave anybody to fall back? Santa Fe is going to be falling back, but they've already destinated, so they got an extra run anyways. And this is going to help him stay in the yellow, so he's probably not too upset about that. Mopac, I think this is the first revenue it's going to have in the game. It was able to connect up, upgrades its home, and runs a 5. Actually tokened in Memphis. So I think that's bad news for Frisco. Frisco was really depending on that, and that was preventable. I mean, Frisco could have tokened in Mobile or laid track to bypass Memphis, but got a little bit greedy. So Ned is kind of sticking it to Roger right now with that token. Running for 270 and half pays, so still worried about permanent trains. Santa Fe probably just going to force buy a 6 here, I have to assume. And I'm amazed that we still haven't seen this track laid into Denver. What is going on with the Fort Worth here? Why? How does it make sense not to lay that track yet? I don't get that. Santa Fe, actually kind of helping the Southern Pacific potentially. Not really though. I keep forgetting that this track is going to block them from heading east. So just looking to bypass Memphis, it looks like, and head down into New Orleans in the long term. Obviously not running with no train. We'll be force buying a 6, it looks like. And does. So Prentice has 3 companies and 1 permanent train. That's the same situation that Ned is in, but Prentice is far and away ahead in this game. So I think we probably have identified our winner, but we'll see how the rest of this game develops. Frisco, tokened out at Memphis, has been given a little bit of help by the Katy player, I believe, in terms of all these upgrades here. So with a $60 track cost, we'll be able to continue hitting his destination, but it's going to have to hit a bunch of dits in order to do that. It's really not ideal. It's going to hurt his revenue quite a bit. He's foregoing that $60 track cost for now and running his 4 train for just 170, but he does have a 6 train with his name on it. So we are now sitting at the 7s, and is there anybody in a position to bring out a 7 train? Or sorry, an 8 train? No, not really. GMO's relatively close, but we'll have to withhold. That may be our path forward in this game, to bring out the 8s. But even if the 8s come out, there's no guarantee that the 10s do or that the 12s do. I mean, if an 8 comes out, that will be covered for Jess. Roger will need one, and Prentice will need one. And that's 3 8s. That's all that needs to be bought. So there's going to have to be some shenanigans to push trains. I think these 5 trains look like a pretty good investment right now. Katie, 2 trains, will have good revenue here. He is actually paying to link up into Jackson. So this is good news for Frisco. He's got a player that's motivated to lay his track for him, it looks like. And Katie does have a token, but doesn't have cash to use it. So his run is 370, pretty strong, and he owns 80% of the company. So yeah, that's really good. Richer getting richer here. And with that track lay, he's actually linked Frisco and the Texas Pacific up to their destinations. For some reason, I thought that the Frisco had destinated already, but it doesn't look like it. So Roger getting a little bit of gift into the stock round, a little bit extra revenue for him. He takes the map token and has a run of 360, which is very strong. And then Texas Pacific, after all my, actually no, I was thinking that this company was the Southern Pacific, but in fact the Southern Pacific still is blocked. So Texas Pacific has reached its destination. And he's running for 360, which is also pretty good. And he takes the bonus in New Orleans. Sorry, the Texas Pacific's actually only running for 240. I got them mixed up with the Frisco. Cotton. Looks like he is upgrading in Wichita and running for 270, which he pays. GMO. Does he withhold for an 8 here? Runs for 200, which is not going to be enough for an 8, so they just want to pay out and withhold later. Texas Pacific, looking to potentially link up down south now, or at least open up these routes. I will have to look at the portfolios in these companies. It doesn't make sense that they're helping each other out as much as they are unless they're heavily cross-invested. So for instance, Prentice laying all that track for the Frisco doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you just look at the investment, but I was forgetting that he was the president of the Texas Pacific, so that's why his Katie and Santa Fe are helping out that destination run. It just has the knock-on effect of helping the Frisco as well. But now, why is he helping kind of the southeast of the map escape from the blockade at Memphis? Not entirely sure. Maybe he sees a better run for the Texas Pacific if he's able to bypass Jackson. Hard to say. Runs for 240, pays it out. Ick, no permanent train for him. And he is heading into Little Rock. No tokens either. He pays out 180. Southern Pacific, I don't know what this company's got left in store for it. It's kind of a rough position. Upgrading into Oklahoma City and withholding. How did he get? Oh, I see. Okay, this is clever. I didn't see this coming. But actually, by upgrading into Oklahoma City, it's able to form this loop and get down into his destination. So that is clever. I'm surprised he has a long enough train for that. Just barely. He has a 4 train, needs a 4 train. Very nicely done. That is a very circuitous route, but it works. So SP has been rescued and is going to be doubling New Orleans. Running for 210 with its destination and actually withholds it. Fort Worth, Are we finally going to see someone get into Denver? Nope. Um, so not entirely sure. Maybe looking to bypass Topeka and eventually get into Kansas City. Are there no straight tiles? Is that possible? No, there's 8. So unclear how this is still not laid. Runs for 260 and pays it out. Mopac is laying track. He finally lays into Denver. So just going to be getting his destination just in the nick of time before the stock round. And does he buy an A train out of pocket or just shuffle trains? The fact that he just spent money on a token in Jackson makes me think that he may not be emergency buying a train. He may want to shuffle trains. But he does. So he has cut the destination run of the Frisco and the Texas Pacific, and he has rusted everybody's trains. All right. Playing a little bit of hardball here. This is the destination run of Fort Worth, and he is also going to be doubling Denver, running for 210 when she pays. Santa Fe going to be falling back. Trainless has to buy an 8 here. This can be his second permanent train, though, if he buys this. He has plenty of cash. It's not that expensive, $500 out of pocket, and he is at a cert limit, so this doesn't really hurt him. It hurts him in the sense that it's slowly eking towards the 12, but he can afford that too. He's far enough ahead. I think something unexpected happened. Ned bought a train over with Cotton in order to force the 8 train out. We were expecting, I think, the Southern Pacific to buy the 8 train, or maybe the Gulf Mobile in Ohio, I should say. So instead, he pushes it out and operating around earlier, and there are now 3 companies that need trains. That makes it much more likely that we'll basically guarantees that we'll get into the 10s. But the 12s are still no guarantee. And the 10s are kind of not as impactful because they aren't associated with a rusting event. And just the way the company order has worked out, the leader of the game is actually going to be able to end up with the cheaper 8 train. So Ned has pushed trains to hurt the other players, but he's actually going to be hurting, the players other than the leader, because someone other than the leader is going to end up with the 10 train. So, I mean, I understand why it's happening, but I'm not going to really change the status quo here of Prentice just kind of walking away with this game. Santa Fe looks like he's working on bypassing Jackson, and he just buys the A train, no problem. May see some adjustments in portfolios here, but we have 2 players already at their cert limit, and there's only 1 company in yellow that's available to buy. So Prentice just basically needs to make sure he doesn't get dumped on in the last operating round or 2, and he should win this game. He has good routes, and he's got 6 shares more than the next player, so he's got this game in a bag, I think. I imagine he'll just be buying the Mopac here. It has an 8 train, it's yellow, so he does. Roger buying the Mopac as well. I think everybody just goes around and buys the Mopac. And this is another example of, the rich getting richer. Prentice is going to be able to secure 2 of these yellow shares, and everybody else should just be getting 1 of them. Jess buys the Mopac. Ned, he buys the Mopac, and Prentice snags the last one. So he's just getting everything he wants in this game at this point. Roger, he buys the Texas Pacific. Does get a little bit of an increase in value by an IPO to market. Jess, reissues her share, gets a little bit of cash for the GMO. Yeah, not clear what she's doing there. Usually you want to leave those shares in the treasury. Ned is passing. He's not at his cert limit, and is sitting on $800 cash. There are purchasable shares, for instance, this TP. Yeah, interesting. Prentice, he's doing some share or stock optimization and will sell a IC share, which he is anticipating having to fall back. And what does he buy instead? He buys the GMO. Does Roger do any price protection? This will be the last share if he does. He does. Okay. Jess, passing at share limit. and Ned buying the Texas Pacific. So could have bought that last time, but just passed for no reason. Um, and actually, the issued share in the GMO does get bought, so Jess was able to get the cash into the GMO that way. Still not enough cash for an 8 train, so withholding if she wants that. Ned, the only player left with actions, basically. I spoke too soon. The Frisco is also reissuing a share. Is anybody going to buy that share? It's very expensive. Looks like maybe Jess will. Yeah, so she bought it and sold her own SOPAC, which is going to be trainless and looking like it's going to need a 10 train. Not going to have a route to support that 10 train. Ned, he bought the IC, and IC is still being purchased. I guess there's not too many shares available otherwise. And Ned goes back for a SP. So everybody's at their cert limit, and it looks like we'll be passing into the stock round. This means Prentice will be maintaining priority and should be winning this game. Interesting that we saw 2 reissues of shares. I don't think we've seen that on the channel yet. Can be good. Really depends on how much life is left in the game. If you issue them late in the game like this, the stock value you get from the share purchase is going to be larger than the revenues. But if you're running for a decent revenue, for instance, $17 a share, you'd probably rather have that than the one-time market price, unless you're immediately going to have to buy a permanent train, which is perhaps what is going to happen here. So Frisco, he is looking to cooperate with the track that Prentice has been laying to bypass Jackson. And having said that, actually doesn't lay the gentle curve. Is there no gentle curve? There is no gentle curve. So I was talking about the straights being out before and they weren't, but this time there actually is a valid reason not to have laid the track we expected. So this will have to be upgraded potentially by the Katie to get this bypass of Jackson, which will negate both of the Mopax tokens that it's laid throughout the game. So that's bad news for Ned. Frisco not able to hit his destination. Will have a little bit of a poor revenue this round. Just 220, which he pays. And Katie, he gets the upgrade that we were talking about. So good news for his Texas Pacific. Running for 260, pays it out. Cotton, 2 5 trains. Doesn't, I guess he has a decent 5 train run, but going to be a little bit underwhelming probably. Upgrading Kansas City, no token for him there. And runs for 440, actually pretty good. GMO, are they going to withhold for the 8 train? He does, or half pays at least. So that's the last 8 train, and Texas Pacific just misses out on that. We'll have to buy a 10 train. But that's okay. That will mean that Prentice has got all the permanent trains he needs, and even if the 12s come out, will not be in any danger of losing his lead. So we see the 10 train. Fort Worth is upgrading Austin and runs into Denver for 290. Pays that out. The IC also going to have to fall on a 10 train, it looks like. I must have been missing some train shuffling. There's a lot more companies that need 10 trains than I was expecting. And actually, as it stands, we're actually looking at the 12 trains as well. The Southern Pacific can, of course, buy a train down from the GMO if they want, but could also just emergency buy that 12. It's not really going to change the game state in terms of Prentice's lead. He has all of his permanent trains. So the players are kind of forcing through these trains, but it's taking a lot of grit. They're going to have to emergency buy a lot of these trains. IC is shuffling a train from the Frisco, and the Frisco is now trainless, so he's consolidated cash at least. And the Frisco, I guess does have routes for a longer train now that this bypass of Jackson has been laid. So probably makes sense to shuffle the shorter train into the Ick, who has a little bit worse, tokens. Southern Pacific, also shuffling trains. Mopac with an 8 train, upgrades St. Louis, and runs for 360, pretty good run. Withholds, and is buying a train out of the Cotton. So we will see some more train pushing here. But again, they're withholding to bring out trains that are not going to affect the leader. Santa Fe running for 360, and we're into the next operating round. So it looks like Frisco has set himself up for the last 10 train, and then may see Ned do some shenanigans to bring out the 12, which will force Jess to also have a 12, but this is just crabs in the bucket. Players in last place are, rusting each other's trains, and the leader in Prentice is just walking himself to the end line. Frisco buys the 10. Katie with 2 trains. Maybe the last time this 5 train runs, but it's going to be a pretty monstrous run for it while it lasts. 480 pays it out. And I think we'll finish out this operating round and then maybe start skipping ahead just to see if there's any surprises. Cotton upgrades St. Louis into gray, running for 270, pays it out. GMO with the 8 train, running for 330, pays it out. Fort Worth, trainless. Is he going to bring out a 12? He's either going to shuffle or bring out a 12. We'll see. And we do see the 12s. Okay. So looks like the Mopac is losing his run. The Katie has already run the 5. Sopac also losing a run, and Cotton already run their 5. So bad news for, Jess and Ned, players in last place, and Prentice is totally unaffected. TP with the 10 train, running for 440. Look at this run. It's all over the map. He's able to take advantage of the same loop that the Southern Pacific player was using, and as a result is running for 440. Really nice. The map is really opened up with all these bypasses that he and I believe Jess have laid for each other. The Ick running just the 6 train for 290. The Sopac. So at this point in the game, these tokens do become relevant again. A token from the Southern Pacific in Oklahoma City, for instance, would shut down that loop. Token down in New Orleans might also be significant. So there is potential to mess up some of these runs. Token in Kansas City would be interesting. So laying down south, not really sure where that track is going to head. And does not lay any tokens. So worried about affording the 12 train, but doesn't really need to be. They have so much cash on hand. It's not like they're going to sell shares. I think the token would probably be worthwhile laying. Santa Fe also has a token. Upgrading in Houston. And running for 380. Actually half paying, probably for token money. I think that the Southern Pacific player really needed to consider laying that token somewhere. Now they're going to have to withhold to get token money. Mopac upgrading to Springfield, and we finally see Chicago upgraded, or not upgraded, but connected. So does that mean that the Ick is going to have a destination run? Not quite yet, it doesn't look like. We'll have to upgrade here or connect up through Kansas City to get that. Runs for 390. Half paying. And having said that the Ick was not going to have a destination run, they somehow do. How are they getting that run? I see. Through Springfield. That is a very circuitous route. And the 6 train looks like it's just barely enough to get them there. Wow. These routes are getting hard to trace. So he takes the bonus on the map and pays for 340. We're into the last operating round of the set. Let's just look at the revenue here. So it looks like Prentice has been running for $1,000 more than the player with the next most revenue. He is already $1,400 ahead of his closest competitor. He has no train liability. There's no opportunity for any dumps. So I don't see how Prentice could possibly lose this game. Let's skip this operating round and just look briefly at the map to see if anybody has dropped any tokens. Um, so I was looking at Oklahoma City. I was expecting maybe a token to end up there. It does look like Prentice has secured a token in Kansas City, so I think we did see a withhold for that. That potentially will cut up someone's runs, but not the leaders, so that won't be changing any status quo. Um, and does anybody have any cash for tokens at this point? Not the Mopac. So Sopac actually can lay both tokens if they want, but I don't know that those tokens are going to mean anything at this point. I think Prentice is so far ahead. If we look at the revenue once everybody has their trains, um, Prentice must have emergency bought a train or something. Um, so Katie has 2 trains, and it looks like he force bought a 12 into the Santa Fe. So he dropped down. He's only $300 ahead now, but his lead was so strong that he was able to basically just style on the other players and buy a train that he didn't even need. So I think that we can safely skip this stock round. Doesn't look like there's any setups for a dump. And we are into operating round 8. In terms of the game, there's only $3,000 left in the bank pool. Game will be ending. So I think we can safely assume that Prentice has won this game. We'll skip this operating round and just look to see if these Southern Pacific tokens come out anywhere. Looks like they are not being dropped. And if we look at the revenue, Prentice is $500 ahead of everyone. It was already leading at the start of the stock round, so Prentice has won this game. We'll skip to the end. Well played to Prentice. There was a lot of sloppy play in this game. I think that the early game in particular was much too slow. Players were just investing in each other's shares instead of starting companies, rusting trains, that kind of thing. There was also a lot of cooperation and lack of tragic track being laid in this game. The map really opened up, and the tokens ended up being kind of inconsequential because you had, all these bypasses in the center of the map being laid that, many times you won't see because not all the players are willing to cooperate with one another. But regardless, Prentice played well throughout. I think he was favored to win from the early game. And he was the Katie winner. So even back in the auction, we were saying that, maybe he got a little bit of a good head start there. And it does manifest into a $2,000 net worth lead at the end of the game. Well played, and Track Talk will be back with additional commentary in the future.